I see some.
Is Juan there?
Juan's here.
He's just been listening to us banter back and forth.
Where is he in his car?
Oh, I'm out in the Jeep on the backside of the farm here checking on stuff.
Oh, nice. That's the Jeep I've been in, isn't it?
Might be, yeah. Probably.
Yeah.
How many vehicles do you own, Juan?
I don't actually know.
How many vehicles doesn't he own? Is maybe a better question.
I've got a few.
Is
there's
different. The bluish Jeep, yeah?
Yeah.
That's all needs to be said.
I mean, here you can see if this is if it looks right to you there, Tom. Let's see. Get outside.
Yeah, that's the one. That's where we. Yeah, I remember that.
Nice.
I remember that in Vegas, and you, me, and another friend, we went for our second meal. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember that.
It doesn't look dirty enough, Juan. You need to go off-roading a little more.
Well, I probably got some off-roading to do before the day is over. Places to go, things to do. So,
well, Merry Christmas to you,
for the day.
buddy. We're it's as they say, the most wonderful time of the year. So we'll kick it off. We've got it recording, so that's fine. We can just carry on.
Do you want me to just we'll just
we'll chop when one came on, we'll chop the beginning.
Okay.
We'll see the car, that's cool, but we'll chop the beginning like us chippering before off. So it's nice, it's natural, it's organic. So I'll introduce it. And so Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to Psych Club. It's Tom Sidney Bushnell, aka Numbers. And we have the effervescent 107 in the house. And we have Rachel, right side blonde, in the other house. And welcome, everybody. Juan, what you got for us, buddy? There's some things I wanted to ask, and there's some things that Rachel wanted to ask, but you might have some things you wanted to share kind of off the beginning. Okay. I'll let you go first, Rachel.
Okay.
And then we'll kind of blend into there might be some longer pieces that Juan comes
I
up with.
apologize, Juan, if somebody else has asked this question, but I've been dying to know since I got my book in the mail. Why is the book 11 inches by 13 7/8 inches? Why is it that size?
Well, actually, it was pretty simple. Most magazines are done at 10 3/4 by I believe it is 12 1/4 or 12 3/4, whatever. So like if you look for Look magazine or something like that's an oversized magazine, certain size. And I did it as a coffee table magazine so that it could be, people could have it out, set it out on the coffee table. Friends are over, guests are over, etc., and they get a chance to see something, and it kind of stands out on the table. They might want to pop it open, take a look, because it's really a tool, as far as I'm concerned, for a conversation with folks that may not, be aware of things that we see happening, or have the same viewpoint. It's a conversation piece that people can begin a conversation with. And a lot of times, you have guests over, friends over during the holidays, etc. If it's there and it looks interesting, they'll pop it open, and hopefully they can open it to any page in the book. They might thumb through it and see a page that sticks out to them and decide, that looks interesting, and they start to read it. If they see stuff that clicks with them, spurs some ideas, some thought, then they may go back to the beginning and start over, whether it's a chapter or the whole book. And you can really almost start anywhere and see stuff that is conversational. And then for the people that have read it, that have understood these things for a while, been looking at them for a while, you can have it triggers a conversation. The simplistic way of saying it is red pilling them. But so much of what's wrong in our countries around the world, people are not conversing. They're just throwing bullets at each other of little teeny pieces of information, but they're not actually having a conversation. So the book is a conversation piece to actually engage, converse, compare thoughts and ideas with some kind of a baseline within the history. Even the way I start the book, this is about, we've made it through these hard points before as a people in all of these different countries. We've been faced with amazing challenges before. Go back to World War I and all the deaths that occurred during the plague and other times throughout history. We can get through this if we're working together, finding reasons to cooperate. If we're not, we're toast. And that's my whole point here.
I like it. I didn't know if there was a reason, like, because you're big with the numbers, and so is Tom, obviously. So I didn't know if there was a reason with those numbers specifically.
Well, I will tell you that the numbers agreed with me, and there was a reason why we shaved a particular 2 as an exact number, yes. But even there, it was a little bit soft because while I pay attention to the numbers, I don't necessarily run myself by the numbers. The other side does, and it's for them, it's a religion. For me, I'm aware, I notice them, but I don't run the numbers as though I get power from it. I observe what the numbers are. I do recognize some synchronicity, but I'm looking for power, weight, momentum, strength by divine assistance and protection, not because of some alignment in an occult sense. And I think there's a lot of people that do see it where they're doing it for magical purposes, and that is not the team that I'm on or that I'm promoting. In fact, it's exactly the opposite for me. So for example, within a scriptural narrative, a biblical narrative, God himself does stuff by the numbers. 40 days and 40 nights, 40 days of fasting out in the desert before Christ was tempted. We see 40 over and over and over because it has a certain meaning. And for example, in the gematria sense, you drop the 0, what are you at? 4. And 4 is the number of foundation. So it's a very foundational experience. Oftentimes people who've gone through, for example, some time of testing that this 40 relates to, the Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years after they left slavery. That became the foundational experience for everything that followed. So we see certain number synchronicities, but the other side of the coin is there's that which occurs naturally, and there's that which is driven, where wizards and magicians believe that by making it happen on the numbers, they can force a outcome as opposed to something that occurs relatively naturally, and we're observing it as synchronicity, complementing, etc., but not trying to drive a narrative based on the numbers. That click for you guys?
Yeah. Your book,
Yeah.
I didn't know any of this existed until your book. So thank you for clarifying all of that in your book. That was way over all of our heads, many of our heads. So yeah.
Well, I mean, and again, go ahead.
No, go on.
No, I just think that it's very important. I wouldn't want anybody to think that I'm pushing something where we're doing something that amounts to an occult practice, sorcery that's designed to tweak the masses to go a certain direction. It's exactly different than that, opposite from that. While I notice it and I do pay attention to it, I'm not at all interested in doing what we do by some type of magical purpose. That is something that we find in the occult. And that's not God in heaven stuff. That's the devil's magic, if you will.
Interesting.
One, I noticed some numbers just as we were talking, and also going on from the conversation that you and I had yesterday. So I noticed Jeep, because obviously you're in your Jeep and we've seen the steering wheel in the car. And
yeah.
Jeep is 36, which is real, which is cool. It's a blue Jeep, as I mentioned, and as you showed us, blue is 40, comes to RV, comes to US. Add them together, comes to 76, comes to Thomas, comes to Ripple. You talked with me yesterday, I don't know if we can go into it, about the other math, and I worked out the numbers on that. And the is 33, which is magic, and Don. Other is 66, which is event, which is woman. And math is 42, comes to new, comes to some other things. But if you do the other math, it comes to 141, comes to looking glass, comes to Tom Bushnell. And you mentioned foundation in this conversation that we've just had. Foundation is 119, which comes to redemption, comes to Mary Magdalene, comes to Nikola Tesla. And I actually purposely put these colors on today because navy 62 and golden is 57, which actually comes to army, but it comes to England, comes to wood, comes to Tesla. And so navy, I should have said, also is 62, which comes to Nikola. So Nikola Tesla comes to navy and golden, which is 119, which is redemption, and foundation. And you mentioned foundation. And if you just do other math, other is 66, math is 42. Add them together comes to 108, which comes to twilight, but it also comes to Fitzgerald. And another thing that we mentioned, which maybe we can go into, I'd like to if we're able to, talking about the other civilization. And I'll just say this on it and let you say what you want to on it. Civilization comes to 142, which comes to I am Nikola Tesla. But if you do the and other, the is 33, others 66, add them together is 99, comes to patriot, comes to judgment, comes to ascension, comes to rapture. But if you add all those together, that comes to, so the other civilization, 33, 66, 142, comes to 241, comes to President John F. Kennedy. So I thought that was interesting after the things we spoke about. I just wondered if we can go into that, that would be a lot of fun. But I'll leave that for your discretion.
Well, again, I see a lot of numbers out there that are complementary, and it doesn't mean that we're allowing the numbers to drive where we're going. There's a synchronicity that comes up repeatedly with the numbers, but it does not drive where we're at. And so I look at it as kind of a fabric of the matrix, if you will, a naturally occurring fabric of the matrix that is there, but we're not driving it. The other team, for example, I'll use an example that I used with you privately, and it works for this audience specifically. Let me ask you this. How many of the people in this audience believe that Prince William being born exactly under a eclipse that was a once in a multi-century occurrence, exactly where it was at over London, that was an accident, that he just so happened to have been conceived at exactly the right moment in time to result in being born exactly under an eclipse on the longest day of the year in 1982. Was that an accident, or had some magicians, some wizards, some geniuses behind the scenes been anticipating for centuries, because they knew when the eclipses would occur, been anticipating for centuries that moment and orchestrating events to be prepared to have someone born that met all the various criteria at that exact second in history? Do you see where I'm going, Tom? That was not a naturally occurring event. That was a concocted, planned, orchestrated series of events. So when we look at what happened with Deanna, was she aware of the role that she was being moved into and the necessary timing of the role that she was being moved into before it occurred? Or did she become aware of it in the course of her life and seeing that these events were not naturally occurring and she was being pushed through these moments in order? And I would let's go to the breeding program that is the Order of the Garter, the Round Table. What is one of William's names? Arthur, the once and future king.
Can you hear him, Rachel?
No.
We've lost you for a few moments, buddy.
Are you with me? Is that making sense?
Yeah, could you just repeat can you just repeat the last kind of
a little tunnel
10
here.
seconds about, we got to the point where you said about Arthur and the Guardian,
Sure.
then we kind of lost you for 10, 15 seconds.
Well, okay, so the name Arthur means the once and future king. And what is it about this breeding program that is the Order of the Garter, the Knights of the Round Table, meeting and deciding who's marrying who and what the bloodlines are, like a horse breeding program, and then to make it fit the dates? Remember, Prince William, you want to go to the numbers, Prince William is the 1000th Knight of the Round Table. Now, Tom, what do you do with zeros?
You zero them out, you cancel them off. So
okay, so what do you have left? If you're the 1000th Knight of the Round Table, you're the one.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, then was that something that was orchestrated over long centuries, a countdown? The 1000th night, all of those relationships, marriages, appointments, that's a breeding program. And the breeding program results in a particular person. And it hits on the numbers, not just on the admission into the Knights of the Round Table position, but also the relevance of that person in being born at a certain time at an exact date. Even the repeating relevance of the number 117. Look at his military service and the Billy Goat and the number of the squadron where he was at. 117 is a repeating cycle, a number. Why? Because 117, he was born in the moon cycle, Saros cycle, S-A-R-O-S, Saros cycle 117. There's overlapping and repeating themes, number themes. But in the case of this particular individual, most people looking at the numbers would say, oh, it's an alignment of the stars. It just happened. It must be God in heaven. And my response would be, no, it is a manufactured thing by wizards, by magicians, by Merlins, anticipating a certain moment in time, a certain climax in history where all the stars line up, and then they're engineering events in the physical to match what they believe is there in the spiritual, if you get the alignments correct. Is that working for you guys? You're kind of seeing how I'm saying this?
Yeah.
So we are led along to believe that, oh my goodness, it was just happenstance. It's a sign of God. You know, this is the one. This is natural. We all have to drop all of our reservations, and you know, God in heaven could only have orchestrated these things and made it all work together. When in reality, there was a plan that was in place and was being worked at, not just for 5 or 10 or 50 years, but for hundreds and hundreds of years. And with that in mind, let's go back to 9/11 here in the States. On 9/11, during the exact hours in which the buildings were struck and then collapsed, the buildings were symbolic of the birth passage and this space between the physical world and the spiritual world, and a birthing process. All the 42 gods of the Greek Parthenon were there present, represented in the various buildings and structures, even to the bull in Wall Street, Statue of Liberty, which is Isis, all witnesses to this birthing event that had been put in place not just for several decades, but for a much, much longer period of time. Even the imagery recorded in the paper bills, dollar bills, 5 and 10 and 20 and 50 and $100 bills here in America, with certain imagery that was in place, hidden in plain sight, to present, you know, some foreknowledge of what was there, that helps everybody to know that, no, this was no accident. This is us, with planning to, you know, make it appear that it just happened. But in reality, we see lots of indications that the planning for that event had been in place for a very long time and had nothing to do with terrorists out of Afghanistan or Iraq or any place else. This is wizards and magicians moving and controlling social consciousness on a planet-wide scale, a type of MK Ultra operation that to all the world might look like it just happened on that timing, but was very precisely planned to coincide with celestial events. Oh, they just happened to get a hold of the aircraft and do it. No, 9/11 could not have happened on 9/10 or 9/12. It wouldn't have even have happened correctly later in the day. Why? Because Virgo was in the birthing process in the stars above at that exact hour. And so there was a celestial significance that Merlins, wizards, magicians, had been plotting and planning and scheduling, not just for tens of years, but more likely hundreds of years, in order to villainize the 9/11 date, which is the true birth date of Christ in 9/11 BC.
It was interesting. You said in your book that Rockefeller was a part of the building of the Twin Towers too. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, Nelson Rockefeller, and of course the family. There's a lot of angles that go back to the Rockefeller family. So, for example, Nelson Rockefeller donated the land that the UN building sits on, and it was a slaughterhouse. So it had been used as a slaughterhouse for about 150 years. Prior to that, these people are into blood sacrifice in order to get energy power for their rituals. They are occult. And with that in mind also, You have other things that the Rockefeller family is involved in similarly. So the Twin Towers, the creation of the UN operation, the Rockefeller families after World War II were the ones that pushed the whole project to create the UN, this international body, and put it into power. And the money that was used to fund the UN operation, the trust fund that was used to fund it was called the Lucis Trust, as in Lucifer, Luciferian Trust. And in the original UN building, when it was completed, was the Lucis Chapel. They later had to change that because it was just too blatant, too obvious. Now, one of the things I mentioned in this same thing, these are people that are trying to bring about the things that are spoken about in Scripture, the Bible, etc. They're not fighting against it. They want it to come to pass. They want an Armageddon scenario. They want a Revelations period of time scenario because they believe that if they lead with that, world consciousness within the Muslim, the Christian, and the Jewish population are all looking for the arrival of the Messiah or the return of the Messiah. And so they have orchestrated events to blend in with, be synchronous with consciousness out across the world's population from the three great religions to match this programming that's out there about a cataclysmic end of the world crisis scenario. They believe if they manufacture it correctly, they can own that crisis moment and turn it from where Scripture, God himself has said it's going, to their own purposes, and they can own the day. It's a jujitsu move. Instead of trying to stop God from doing something to bring the world to crisis, they're actually working to bring the world to crisis, but they control the mechanisms of that crisis. They're pulling the strings, pulling the levers, and then at the right moments, they can take that energy in a jujitsu type move, which in jujitsu, this martial arts, when your enemy goes to strike you, you deflect the blow, grab, say, an arm that's thrust against you, grab it in mid-flight, deflect it so it doesn't hit you with the energy. You use the energy that's coming at you, you add energy to it from your own body, and then use it to throw your opponent. Deflect the blow, take their energy, use it to your advantage, throw them off kilter, and then strike a blow against them while they're vulnerable. That's a jujitsu move. They hope to take this end of the world moment, scenario, etc., and turn it against us, not to fight God, but to take the energy of judgment and use it to their advantage. And you have to remember, even with the things going on in the world right now, the idea is to get God's people, or any people, atheist people, to do things that God has said require judgment, that God has said he will not tolerate, that require him to act because he's a righteous God. So if the devil can get us to do things that God has said he condemns, it's not the devil that judges mankind. It's not the devil that destroys cities like Sodom and Gomorrah or something like that, but God himself, because he's tricked the people into doing things that require God to act. And so the intent here in a jiu-jitsu-like move is to trick the people into doing things that come under the judgment of God. And then God, in this catch-22, is actually the one destroying the very people that, he's supposedly there to protect, because they're doing things that are evil, wrong, ungodly, or directly against God. And so the devil tricks people into doing things that God himself must judge, or else God is not God. And it's part of the ploy. The devil himself actually has no power except for the power of illusion and deception to get us to do things that then require God to act against us. And that's where even aligning things on the numbers, they engineer events to put us in peril. Does that click for you guys? Am I hitting the right notes, sir?
That clicks a lot, Juan. That's a very big click, that, actually, the way you put that. So things that just came up just on the numbers, just to pepper in briefly. You talked about Jesus, Messiah, the Muslims. So Muslims, their prophet Muhammad, and you talked about energy. So all of those words come to 74. So Jesus comes to 74, Messiah comes to 74, Muhammad comes to 74, gematria, which is the numbers, comes to 74, and energy comes to 74. So when you said about that deflecting, that moving in jiu-jitsu, that all lined up. But the analogy you just given about incurring, basically being tricked to do things to trigger God's judgment, I'd never really thought of it quite like that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
I feel like
that's, I mean, again, that's the whole idea of the devil, is he's creating these catch-22 situations. It's all about karma. So that's why they have to tell you what they're doing also. Pre-programming a date like 9/11, pre-programming other things into the narrative. You think that they're naturally occurring and there was no warning. But when you go back later, things like Sandy Hook, where there was a shooting, we look at the movies and Sandy Hook is all over the place. We look at the movies and 9/11 is all over the place. Even the date that Nelson Rockefeller did the first interview talking about the completion of the Twin Towers there in New York, that interview came out on 9/11 of 1967 as the Twin Towers were being completed, as a prelude. And there's certain imagery inside the cover of the magazine and inside the article that relates to, and the buildings are somewhere someday going to be destroyed. So they weren't built like the Titanic itself. It was a death ship from the outset. It was always built to be a death ship because it was about taking out these people in the financial realm that had a certain perspective that ran against this whole central bank thing here in the U.S. and Federal Reserve, and that worked against the Morgan Group and the European bankers, the 13 bloodline families. So they had to create bait for them to get on the ship to supposedly think about these issues and then kill them all the ship. And it's so big, it's so huge, that it's unfathomable to most that this could have been an engineered event designed to occur as it did from the outset. Just like 9/11 with the buildings, to have the audacity to believe that those buildings, before the foundation was even dug, before the blueprints were even completed, was part of a design to bring the world to some type of new cataclysm, after which it would be a tool to lock down humanity, to further enslave humanity. The scale, the magnitude, the vastness of these operations seem to defy human logic, that they could have been engineered. But the reality is, you're not dealing solely with human logic. You're dealing with an entity, a demonic entity, Lucifer himself, who has existed long before Adam and Eve were created and placed in the garden. And that entity, the genius, the planning that's been in place, the technical understanding is so great, even though it's mad, that it evil itself, we talk about madness. Evil defies logic. It makes no sense. In fact, hell itself is a place where logic does not exist. It makes no sense to defy God himself, to defy life, to go against the creator of life. It makes no sense. So when they defy logic like this, you say, well, then it can't be intelligent, smart, etc. No, there's a evil madness that also has a certain precision, a certain logic, that breaks down somewhere, but it's way past where human logic is.
So Juan, you were talking about hell and how there's no logic in hell.
Well, yeah, hell is a place where logic doesn't exist. So if you think about these events, they may appear to be very logical, make all the sense in the world on the numbers, 9/11. And it's the phone number that is our emergency call number, and all the, the aircraft numbers. If you look at the aircraft flight numbers and things like that, over and over, it looks like it's happenstance to have meaning. Even, for example, the number of terrorists that were on the flight, 19 flights. Well, wait a second. 19 is the power number. Oh, they had 20, but one got arrested. They had a backup just in case anything else did happen. And because the number 19 was critical to the whole thing. Why do we have this worldwide crisis going on over this health issue, and it's got the 19 in it again? I'm being careful so it gets us taken down. The spending plan for bringing the economy back, 1.9 trillion. Oh, a 19 again. So we have all sorts of things out there that have certain branding that's critical to, keep a certain narrative going. And the numbers are critical to that narrative. The other team that we're opposed to, led by the devil himself, Lucifer, Satan, Samael, the Green Man, goes by 1,000 names. Osiris. It's the same devil, lots of different names. And in all of that, these same numbers keep coming up because they have meaning in the ritual. The other physics is based on 19.47. Rounded up, it's 19.5. Rounded down, it's 19. And so it has ritual meaning. It's the power number of the hidden physics, hidden right in plain sight, the subatomic physics. So Satan, Lucifer, the devil knows that physics. He knows what the meaning is. He wants things branded a certain way because it gives it ritual meaning.
That's where I wanted to go, Juan.
We have to be cognizant.
Yeah, you read my mind. I wanted to go in. That was my point and question I was going to raise in the other physics. And just before we had the intermission, you talked about the 13 families, etc. But if you do, which you know this because you were pointing this out to me, 13 times 3 is 39, which is an important number. 39 times 3 is 117, 117, which we've spoken of. And then if you do 117 times 3, it takes you to 351. And you were saying how some of those numbers are important in the other physics. And I did the numbers, the simple gematria on the phrase, the other physics. And There's 33. Other is 66, as we said earlier, but physics is 99, which again comes to judgment, comes to patriot, comes to ascension, comes to most high, comes to rapture. But if you add them all together, well, actually, if you just do other physics, first of all, other physics, 66 plus 99 comes to 165. That comes to resurrection. That stirs up a lot of thoughts and images for me. 165 also comes to Christ bloodline. It also comes to Westminster, which is here in London, the borough that I'm in. It also comes to the name of President Trump's self-portrait. Well, he didn't paint it, but the portrait of him in Mar-a-Lago and his study kind of library, well, not library, but the nice, you know what it's like there. But his portrait is called The Visionary. And the visionary comes to 165. And if you take it further and if you do the other physics, that comes to the resurrection, 198. That comes to President J. Kennedy, 198. And it comes to President Trump, 198. But the part about the resurrection, I've spoken to. Can you hear? Oh, what happened there?
Yep, I'm listening. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the resurrection, I've been wondering this. Because one of the things with the whole thing with President Trump talking about, taking we'll just call it the V, the tap on the arm. Yep. And there's been a lot of confusion for people about that. But one of the things I've been thinking about, and I was going to do, and I probably will do a more detailed episode, but I think I can put the thought and the idea out there, is that somehow President Trump is putting that out. And he's saying that, whether that encourages people to get it in the movement or not, I don't think that really is. But even if there is, and even if it is in the world, if you've got 198 is the resurrection, the other physics is 165. Sorry, the other physics is 198, the resurrection. 198 is President Trump. I'm thinking, and I've been thinking for a while, that somehow, if he's actually saying to do that, it's covering all his bases, almost like an insurance policy, that I believe he's got a redemption, a divine redemption, and that could be to do with the other physics and maybe other things that we don't necessarily know, but definitely a divine superior remedy to that, because I don't believe for a second that he's going to allow what we've gone through in the last 18 to 24 months as 18 to 21 months as a global population. He said clearly, almost maybe over a year ago, he said, I don't want any more death. And I believe him. So I don't think for a second that he's going to allow something that is causing people problems, or potentially, or perceptively, I don't think he's going to allow that and not have a remedy. And I believe that could be closely intertwined with potentially the other physics, and divine blessings and power from God, because I think he is the Trump of God in the last days. So there's some of my thoughts on that. But you brought it straight out, the other physics, and the other physics is 198, President Trump, the resurrection. Oh, who have we lost?
Oh, hold on a second. I might have bumped it myself. There we go. All right.
There you go.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
So yeah, there were just some thoughts and statements on that, but I was wondering if maybe you can shed
let
me
help you out there, Smidge. Let me help you out here, Smidge. For example, with the 39, that's 3 times 13. There's 13 bloodline families that go back and claim that they are the descendants of Cain in the Bible. Cain, their belief, doesn't matter what you believe. You have to remember that. Doesn't matter what you believe. This is a religion. And in the religion, this Cainite religion that we're dealing with here in the world right now, they believe that there's 13 families that are the primary bloodline families, descendants of Cain, that are in the world today. And picture for yourself the Jews, the Israelites. Adam and Eve had lots of kids. Okay. Their children and children, great grandchildren, great grandchildren. Yet for the biblical narrative, the inheritors of the promise of Adam, the inheritors of that inheritance, the physical and the spiritual seed, are the children of Abraham, one descendant many generations removed from Adam himself. And the 12 tribes come from his descendant 2 generations removed, which is Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. So while you have a line of people whose bloodline goes back to Adam, the inheritors within the Jewish religion of the promises to receive the earth specifically go to those 12 families. And there's another wing that's a generic going all the way back to Adam himself, which is the rest of the earth's population, but specifically to Jerusalem and Israel and their father Abraham. The 12 tribes are specifically identified as those 12 tribes that came from Jacob. In the Cainite religion, we're not talking 13 bloodline families going back to Cain specifically, but a later time where they still all come from a specific branch of the Cain family. And in their case, they believe that it's the 12 tribes that are the Jewish Israeli tribes plus 1, that they've been excluded from the inheritance, and that was wrong. And so they believe that they're the true inheritors of both the Adam side and the Cain side, and that their belief is that their father through Cain isn't Adam. Their father is Lucifer, Satan, the devil. And so Eve had sex with this humanoid, but that wasn't human, who was of the reptilian families. And that is, you hear people talking about the aliens walking amongst us, the reptilians here on the earth amongst us. Well, what they're referring to are the Cainite bloodline families, children of Cain, and the aliens. Look, if the devil came into the garden and the devil wasn't from the garden, then he is an alien to the human race. So they're laughing at us, hiding in plain sight with their Cainite religion, the reptilians walking amongst us, and they're cloaking themselves and you can't see them. They're the grail for the Cainites in their mind. That's the way they view this, and they're doing magic right there in plain sight, fooling the masses because you're looking for them arriving in a spaceship, and they've arrived in a nano ship through the genetics and changing the genetics of mankind. And ultimately, we're in the same battle that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. If Cain, in their belief, they believe that when Cain finished killing Abel, he was next going to go kill Adam. If he had succeeded in killing Adam, there would be no ability of God to bless Adam and his seed with an inheritance of the earth, except through Cain, which then blesses Lucifer, breaks the curse against Lucifer for which he was cast out of heaven, and puts Lucifer, Satan, the devil, on par with God. He never wanted to be greater than God. He only wanted to be as God. And so on the same level as God. If God has to bless him by giving his seed an inheritance, God's caught in a catch-22 because he promised the world and all that was in it to Adam and his seed with no precondition. He didn't say, if you do this, I'll do that. If you act properly, I'll bless you with the earth. He gave it to Adam and his seed without precondition. If God destroys the earth, destroys all of Adam's descendants, if they somehow are wiped out, God can't give what he promised to give. So his promise falls flat. He's no longer God. If he has to bless that which he has cursed, Satan, Lucifer, the devil, who cast out of heaven, if he then has to turn around and bless him and his inheritance, his tribe, his bloodline, then God is equally unable to carry out the curse against Lucifer. It's a catch-22. But all of that rests on the idea that Lucifer, when he came to Eve, in their religion, doesn't matter if you believe this is what the Bible says or what actually happened, has nothing to do with it. This is their religion. They believe that the devil can outsmart God by forcing God to bless the devil's seed. In order to do that, you have to kill Abel and Adam. And that Cain was thwarted. Lucifer himself was thwarted because God blocked Cain from getting to Adam. So Adam survived. He then has another child with Eve, and that's Seth. And Seth becomes the line through which all mankind is born, the children of promise. If the devil had killed, if Cain had killed his father Adam, the only way to bless Adam's seed would be through Eve, because Eve was created out of Adam's rib. She was taken out of Adam's side, so she was 100% human. If Cain had had sex with his mother, then she would have bore a child, but the child would have been a hybrid, part of the Luciferian line and part of the Adam line, coming from Eve, the mother, who is pure human. You have to understand how these people think. And so the fight that we're in today in the world right now is still about killing off all mankind if only one direct descendant from Adam still exists, who doesn't have commingled blood, who hasn't part Cainite through marriage, through breeding. If only one human, male and female, exist that are pure human, going back to Adam and Eve, then the whole thing can start over again, just like it did back at Seth. So the objective is, even with the 23andMe and mapping out the population with great intricacy, is to make sure that all humans who may be direct descendants without commingled blood are dead. And if you go back to the story of Noah, the world was at this precipice before, because it says that Noah alone was perfect and without sin at the time of the flood. Well, okay, but Noah did things that God was upset with. So how can you say he was perfect and without sin? You have to read the rest of the scripture. Perfect and without sin in all of his generations. He wasn't commingled. He wasn't this alien blood. So again, you're going back to the Cain and Abel story. And by the way, when the Israelites went into Canaan land, when they left slavery, went out across the desert, and they went into Canaan land, what was it that they found there when the spies went in the land and reported? And then later, when they went back to take the land was full of giants. They were humanoid, not human, not direct descendants of Adam. They were humanoid, not human. People get all caught up on this and they don't quite grasp this subtle difference. There has been civilization, there has been society, there has been creation prior to Adam and Eve. When the Bible talks about the earth was void and without form, it actually is using a word that means plowed, like a field. And there is a prehistory, and we see it all over the earth, of humanoid type creatures, but not human. And so this is this huge battle, this fight that we're in right now. When we talk about these things, we lose a lot of the people that are Bible believers, that are Christians, because it's a concept, it's an idea that's hard for them to get their mind around, and they think that they have a precise understanding of history. And even the Bible protects these understandings and knowledge. Look, it talks about the Nephilim, it talks about the Anunnaki, these non-human entities that are humanoid but not human. And so people think of them as only as just angelic beings. Well, they fell to earth, but it doesn't mean they don't have physicality. And that's where a lot of people get caught up on some of this stuff. It's a conversation. Look, I don't have to have a fight with my Christian brothers and sisters, or my Muslim friends, or my Jewish friends. We can have the conversation, and at the end of the day, you may not agree, but that doesn't, at the end of the matter, we're fighting a religion who's orchestrating events. Their actions are based on their beliefs. Belief is the driver of action. That's something I've said in an article that I wrote, a decade ago, that, I've reiterated numerous times. Belief is the driver of action. These people are acting based on their beliefs. So they believe these things. They believe that they're older than Adam and Eve, that their bloodline is older, and that they have the right to rule by blood, and that by commingling their blood with the Adam line, they get power, and that their mother, bloodline goes back to Eve, but they don't go back to Adam. And because they're more than human. They're not merely human, they're more than human according to their beliefs. And so they have greater power and authority. We might consider them less than human, and their actions are less than human because they want to see, in this Luciferian mindset, all pure humans sacrificed. If the last direct descendant of Adam, just like had Noah himself died, there would be no direct descendants that were 100% human. They would all have commingled blood with the Cain line, and then God would have had to bless Lucifer through his progeny in this Cain line thing with the mixed blood. And by the way, for Christians who get all stressed out over this, what can I be saved if I got Cain blood in me? I've almost certainly got it. Two things. Number one, the reason why the Jews are such a huge target is because the greatest likelihood of a direct descendant all the way back to Adam, male and female still existing, is in the Jewish heritage. And that negates the, there's always a direct descendant back to Adam to receive the earth, inherit the earth, rule over the earth there, and fulfill the Adamic promise to Adam, that his seed, he and his seed would inherit the earth forever. If the devil can kill the last direct descendant of Adam, and all that's left is the commingled blood, the hybrids, then the devil wins. And so in their Georgia Guidestones mentality, they're seeking to destroy all mankind except hybrids, and finding them anywhere in the earth. If there's one left, they're toast, because just like Adam, he was still alive. If Cain had killed Adam, Cain would have had sex with the mother, hybrid. And by the way, their religion, go to the Osiris religion. What was the story of Osiris? In my book, the story of Osiris is that his brother killed him. It's a reversal. They love reversals. It's a reversal of the Cain and Abel story. In this story, the twins are born of Isis, their mother. And so Set and Osiris. Set was the good brother and who was very benevolent towards mankind as a god. And Osiris was the other twin, and he was exceedingly evil. He was the most evil and vicious of the gods. And so Set, the good brother, killed the evil brother. Again, a reversal of Genesis, of the, they like reversals. It's part of the witchcraft. So when Set killed Osiris, he chopped Osiris into 14 pieces, and then being a god, he scatters them over the whole world, and he killed him on the 17th day of the first month. When Isis, the mother, found out, just one second now. When Isis, the mother, found out that Set had killed his brother, she ran out across the world, and being a god, she was able on this same day before the sun set to find 13 of the 14 pieces of Osiris's body. She brings them all to one place, reassembles them, and sees that his body is missing the penis. So she fashions a penis out of stone and then has sex with the dead corpse. And being a god, goddess, whatever, she's able to conceive a child. And there's a lot of hidden imagery in there. For example, now you have if you know, say that she was able to conceive, what do we make computer chips out of? We make them out of silicon, sand. The stone is just, you know, silicon sand compacted together. If she has sex with the dead corpse and the silicon or the sand stone is part of that conception process, the basis for silicon life, it's man and machine mated together. There's a lot of imagery that only the devil himself could have thought of that far back, that actually is part of the myth and the religion out into the current time. There's a evil genius that transcends our knowledge and time at this moment in history in the normal course of human development. So in their religion, the good brother kills the bad brother, the reverse of Genesis. The mother, in an Eve-like situation, if the devil had had his way, conceives a child by the son, but the son is a dead corpse. Imagine the imagery here. I mean, talk about evil and death and everything else and necromancy, etc. It goes to their whole religion. So when you put it in those kind of terms, now the relationship between Horus, that child is called Horus, and Horus in their religion is the rising sun. It's the sun in the sky above us right now. They're sun worshipers. That's their whole religion. There's Saturnus, there's a black sun, there's all sorts of angles that you can get into it. But like any religion, you got, you know, the Protestants and the Catholics, Muhammad, you got 1,000 variations within the religion. So as soon as you try to understand it with exacting precision, it gets pretty wild. You spend your whole lifetime trying to dissect all the various chapters, etc. And Lucifer, Satan, the devil's laughing at you the whole time because you're spending your time occupied on his religion, not in God. That in their religion, Eve is still their mother, Lucifer's their father. Their bloodline is this commingled Luciferian Eve religion. And in fact, the pillar, the monument, the dildo in plain sight is things like the Washington Monument. It's all these steeples and towers. So these pillars around Egypt, even in the Old Testament and Chronicles, it talks about the pillar symbology, monuments to the tower god. And they were in the Holy of Holies, blended religion with the Judaic religion in the Old Testament. They were worshiping in a blended religion sense God, and had the throne of God there, and then they had these dildos, monuments in stone inside the Holy of Holies, and it was a blended religion. You see across the country, across the world, in the Christian churches, these towers, bell towers, spires on the churches, these steeples. And most people don't have any realization that the steeple is actually symbolic of the pillar or the stone Osiris, just like the Washington Monument. And what do they place on top of it? A cross. What is it? To the occult, to these Masons, to the other religion, the Cainite religion, the deep.
Losing you a bit, one.
Are you there?
Christians, because the mechanism by which they're saved, that the devil himself is saved by this phallic symbol. That's their religious symbol of salvation. And on the churches where they put these steeples, they put a cross on top of it. What do you have? A blended religion. That's why the designers over and over, they hide it like it's a sign of God, and they put the cross on. It's a blended religion. As much a blended religion as that which God cursed when he sent Ezekiel to see what was going on behind the screen, behind the curtain in the Holy of Holies, when the priests had these tower god symbols to Osiris, to Horus, to the Babylonian god, and they were bowing to the rising sun, Horus, and turning their ass to the throne of God inside the temple grounds. We have a blended religion all around us, and a lot of people think that they're worshiping God in heaven, whether it be by the numbers or certain symbols, putting the cross on top of the spire, and they don't understand the underlying symbology of these things, and the fact that they think they're being all holy and everything else, and they're actually doing the devil's worship, symbolically right there in plain sight. Even the Christmas tree and much of the Christmas festival, it's the Saturnist festival at the longest night of the year, has nothing to do with the birth of Christ. Nothing.
Oh, I've heard that. I want to go back to something you were talking about, the 23andMe. Were you insinuating that they use that knowledge to seek out certain individuals?
Absolutely.
Wow. And then
you're doing the tracking and mapping for them. And even if you don't directly participate, some relative of yours assisting them, a combination of relatives, somewhat removed, they've got you tracked down to a fairly precise group, and they know other relatives of yours, your spouses, other generations. They know who's in the right zone and who isn't got a prayer, and they can set you aside. Yep, those are all blended. Here's one that we have to worry about, and it's pure, and we got a problem here. And so they're tracking things. You may not realize it. You have no knowledge of it, but they're intricately mapping and tracking. And by the way, that data isn't being crunched by humans, it's being crunched by computers. And this is part of the genius of the mating of silicon life forms with biological life forms, because if they can mimic the genetic material closely enough, it's very complex, then they can download consciousness into the machine and survive physical death by extending that consciousness out over large volumes of machine, out over space and time, and not ever experience physical death. Being blended in with the silicon is what they believe. And that's their hope, to escape physical damnation, exclusion from the 3D world, the physical world, if that genetic code that goes back to the Luciferian line is somehow destroyed. There's other, I mean, I could go into great depth, but I'd lose most of your listeners on the nanofilaments and things like that this is related to. So
another question too. Early on, there were some articles that seemed to claim, I'm going to be careful about how I say this, but the thing that has 19 at the end of it that a lot of people got, that it was harming those with certain blood types worse than others. Do you think there's
absolutely
that, like maybe they were targeting certain blood types with that?
Yes. Yep. Totally. There's no question about it.
Do you have an idea on what the percent, you talked about the reptilian blood and there's a lot of hybrids. Do you have an idea on what the percentages of those groups are? Is it less? Is it a lesser portion of the world's population that are pure, that don't have any hybrid mixing, or is there an elite group of pure reptilians? And I'm just wondering what the kind of percentages we might be looking at on both sides.
Well, you're never going to get to pure reptilians. They're all hybrids. The children of Cain have the human blood in there also, and so to think that you're going to get to that is not right. Leave the turkeys out here. Now we know where they're at.
Maybe the other side, that like the pure non-reptilian, no hybrid at all. What is there any idea on what that might be as a percentage of the Earth?
Well, you only need one pair, and out of 7 billion, the likelihood is that there's actually quite a large number. But you go back to the time of Noah, not to the time of Adam, and so the question is, what's that number? Again, it doesn't have to be very many, and they may not. Just like I would contend that Deanna had no knowledge that she was so critical coming into this. She was naive to her role in many ways. She became very aware, and it became quite a big deal for her. And that's why she said near the time when she was murdered or died, she wanted to be William's Merlin. She wanted to be the Merlin helping him of his life and how he was going to rule, etc. Because she was very aware by then what was going on. But she, the scale, the magnitude, the vastness of what was going on was too much for her to figure out, or manipulate herself personally, privately. So again, what we have here is a lot of people that may not even realize their role in what's going on, and yet, somewhere out there, known to God and possibly known to these people, are a couple of people that might be that one. So, that's what's going on.
Bruce record. One part of that one that as well. So we talked about the bloodlines, etc. And but one going back to my question from a few moments ago. I believe that President Trump's got something up his sleeve in terms of a remedy for what's going on in terms of the physical thing. So people are being encouraged to get this, and I think potentially it could be connected to the higher physics. And I mean, I asked you once about would it be Tesla, and you said, well, stem cells. STEM is 57, Tesla's 57. Is there any truth in my thinking that there is some kind of remedy that President Trump's has got?
Well, the remedy in reality, the immune system does overcome this as soon as 3 months after you've succumbed to all of the pressure to get it. And you can see we're being coded in our conversation to keep from getting kicked out.
Yeah.
It in some people can go much longer, but that's why you have to keep doing it and doing it and doing it until your immune system is knocked down so far that it can't correct for it. When we do certain tests to look at the immune system's health, above a certain threshold, the immune system is able to weed out the altered blood and tissue that has been modified into a manufacturing plant for spike proteins. But it takes time, and the reality is that if your immune system's too far down, then you succumb to various other illnesses. That's why a lot of the people that succumb to this, they die of a myriad of issues or have sickness, illness on a myriad of different types of sickness that, you can't just say, well, it's this, or it's this, or it's this. For example, with AIDS, the early common denominator that denominated the AIDS problem was Kaposi sarcoma, a very unusual type of skin cancer with lesions. When people's immune system got knocked down to a certain point, that was what was the common way that it was seen, and people were dying of quote unquote AIDS. But the reality is that was a very rare form of cancer. There was lots of other more common forms that people were dying of just in larger numbers than had been previously occurring, because again, it's an immune response or the fail of the immune system to respond to various kinds of sickness. That's what's happening here, is there's a damaging of the immune system, and people are dying of lots of different things, some more instantaneously or directly than others. And so, it's harder to track, but we look at the time periods. And by the way, one of the things is they said that in the, reaction to this stuff, if you expired sooner than 2 weeks, well, it couldn't be in reaction to this. So you have a lot of people that died that don't even go into the catalog, and yet they are dying from this.
Yep.
So, they're cooking the numbers. The reality is that the numbers are catching up with people across the world. They're understanding that this is the term I would use. This is injecticide. People are dying from injecticide exposure.
Okay.
And if I was going to pass a term out to the world, I'd use that term. People
Right.
are dying from insecticide. And so why is that a problem for President Trump? President Trump was very clear when he went out to the world and said that he had taken the pills, if you will, that are quinine-based products.
Yeah.
Those quinine-based products were adequate to overcome the viral infection. And then he felt bad for a day or two, and then he felt fine. And so it was very survivable. The crowd that brought this on the world had the material that's being put, in everybody, ready to go in 2015. That's been widely proven, exposed, documented. There's no longer a mystery about that. So how can they say they're developing it when it was there in 2015? What happened was they were forced to release it, put it out to the world ahead of schedule. And then President Trump said, I will not mandate it, although, go get it. But you have to read between the lines. You have to decide, if there's an alternative, which one makes better sense? Doesn't matter who's pushing it on you. You have to be a big kid and make adult decisions. And so when he's saying, well, go ahead and get it, it's great, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, everything else, because there's some people that would never, ever believe that they could be okay unless they have this placebo. It's a mental placebo effect. Okay, now I can go back. And you can't have the world remain shut down. They wanted to keep the world shut down until they completely controlled the vote, the media, and your physical right to choose or not to participate in this test. And so there, because we are at war, it's much bigger than most people can even begin to comprehend. So you have to act accordingly. Make decisions, adult decisions, and you got to live with the consequences. If there's a scripture. It says that those who lack knowledge suffer because of it. If you don't know certain things, if you don't take the time and trouble to learn certain things, you will suffer. This is about learning and making informed decisions. And if you don't learn, if you decide to stay mentally weak, uninformed, you're going to suffer for it. So make an informed decision that fits where you're at. And, Paul in the Bible says, if I come preaching any other gospel, then don't listen to me. I might be out of my mind. The gospel I'm preaching to you now is the correct gospel. There was a certain way of saying things that left, personal choice in it. And the efforts now going on across the world are to remove your personal choice option, as though you're the threat to the world, when the statistics, the data, the information do not back up that you're protecting anyone, including yourself, by participating in this global experiment. So you have to resist, you have to fight. What's the agenda? The agenda is something far bigger than just keeping you healthy. Somebody has a plan, and they're trying to work it out.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Juan.
Yeah. No, somebody has a plan and they're trying to work it out.
Patel Patriot put out a survey on Telegram that said, like, will you go get this? Will you still vote for Trump? and it was all very positive. The results were very positive. So people are still using discernment, and people are still looking past that. And I think we collectively know there's a good reason why he's pushing it. Maybe not everybody knows why, but this makes sense. And I've heard other theories too that all make sense to me.
Well, look, let me say it in a certain way that might help. I have friends, business, political, religious, in lots of areas where we are friends, but there's things that they say or do or represent that I will not go there. And it doesn't mean that I hate them, doesn't mean that I won't talk to them, but I'm just not going there. In this regard, for myself personally, and let me be clear to anybody that I'm sharing with, is my personal advice, my very strong advice. I don't care who's pushing you or for what gain, for what protection, even to be able to get food on the table. This is killing people. Don't do it. You're playing Russian roulette. I'm familiar with something, we were just made aware of it here the other day, where the person, in order to keep work, to finish out till he got to his retirement, another year or so, said, well, I just got to get it because I got to be able to work. I got to finish out this last year. Gets it, and 3 days later is dead. Okay, well, how did he help his family or himself? He played Russian roulette, and it didn't work. Others, they're at the third one, and they're fine as far as they're concerned. What is it worth playing Russian roulette? My contention is no. People in school who just want to finish. I have somebody else that very close to me who has 1 quarter left in school, in medical school, that has to get this, or they can't come participate, and they can't do it remotely. So the question is, do you stop your whole life, the career you've trained for a long period of time? They pushed it off as long as they possibly could. Do they get that one time play Russian roulette in order to be able to go out and do the rest of their career? And my contention is, by the way, and you want to go do stuff in the medical community, the second you do this and you get your degree, you're going to have it to go get that first job. Is it worth your life? Might be worth taking a pause, because a year or 2 or 5 from now, the only people out there that would be able to function are the ones who didn't participate. They may be the ones that have to save the world, because they're the only ones that are left fully functional. It does damage the heart muscle. It does damage the vascular system, the lungs. Does damage the brain stem and the reproductive organs. So are you willing to take that chance in any of those areas? And all you got to do is look at the football players around the world, to those in the U.S. soccer players. Everybody else in the world calls them football. But look at the number just keeling over, unexplained, insane. Don't do it.
Yeah.
You had asked a question earlier too about blood, like what percentage, before we kind of took a pause. Like what percentage?
Yeah.
Did you want to finish that question?
Yeah. So, well, maybe we can hold on to that one, Rachel. Just in summarizing what you've said there, Juan, just so I'm clear, and maybe some others that are listening. So I concur with what you just said in the last 5 minutes, not to take it at any costs. But it was new to me, the part you said maybe 10, 12 minutes ago, about how it's kind of like a 3-month expiry date on most of them. So I wasn't aware of that. So reading
Well,
between
it's
the
not
lines.
every person. That's an average.
Okay.
Most people's immune system, if it's reasonably strong, will
Can deal with
negate
it.
and flush out
Okay.
these cells that the immune system recognizes as being altered or wrong.
Okay.
If your immune system is knocked down below a certain threshold, it can no longer weed those out and flush them out, and it goes rampant, and then, you know,
And that's
it's
when
just
you're
a
in
matter of time
trouble.
for you. Yeah.
Okay. So from what you're saying with that, then is it correct to understand that pretty much most of these that people are taking are, because I've heard different theories on it, you know, that some's placebo, some are nothing, some may even have some good things in it, but is it pretty much across the board a similar product, a similar quality in terms of quality, that's probably the wrong word, but a similar dose that people are taking, and depending on where they are in terms of their health, their immunity, their lifestyle, is going to be that Russian roulette element that people don't know where they fully are on the board, and then they could, if they slip below a certain level, that's when they're going to become a cropper.
Well, again, you can even have a pretty good immune system, but get a golden BB. For example, I have a person that had a very, very strong immune system that we tested that was in the upper 10% of the US population for their overall immune system's capability, but had a spike protein, a group of them actually, that had lodged in his thyroid. And one of them was right on a capillary vein. And so it was being fed with the nutrients from the bloodstream. And that one had grown quite large. It was in what we would call a precancerous condition, about the size of a pea. And because of the way it works, it's an irritant. Because it's crystalline in nature, it resonates with the radio frequency that we're all immersed in, but from Wi-Fi and cell phones and everything else. And so it's there as an irritant. Eventually, the immune system, that would be a cancer site that potentially could develop. You could say, well, it wasn't cancerous. No, it was not. It was a growth that could have stayed in a benign state, but it certainly was still disrupting his biological function there in the thyroid, and messing him up on his hormonal balances, etc. If he'd gone to a normal doctor, just gone through normal testing, they would have seen the hormonal condition, probably diagnosed him with a hyper or hypothyroid situation. And they probably would have found the growth pretty instantaneously using x-rays or an MRI. But then the treatment would have been different because they wouldn't have attributed it to the spike proteins being present. When we illuminate it the correct way, we see the spike proteins present, and then we were able to break them up pretty instantaneously. And then the body's own immune response can put it back under control. That was, that's the easiest way to have dealt with it. But a normal medical response would have taken much longer. He might have taken a month to get through the diagnosis process and information back. Could have even been longer. And in that time period, it could have gone from what would have been benign to a cancerous situation. Being on a capillary vein, it would have spread through the rest of the body pretty quickly, and you could have had all sorts of issues very quickly. So, a bit speculative, but certainly we found something that had to be dealt with and was. And we've got lots of other situations that we can see that, this is messing with people's physiology all over the world in similar situations. The thing that's killing people is the spike proteins. predominantly at this point in time. And that's what the mRNA gene modification produces.
Was your friend, was he a person that got that, or was it like the residual? I'm being careful with my words.
And would never have done it, but he was exposed to people directly in a family situation that all had.
I missed that. I think I froze for a second. Did you say that he was, or he was a residual?
No, he had not gotten
okay.
that. He had lots of people around him in a family situation who had, and was having direct contact with them, all day, every day type of thing.
That's unbelievable.
Hold on, can we change tack slightly?
Yeah.
You mentioned the city out in the Middle East yesterday. Can we go into that a little bit?
We might want to save that for another day. I don't want to get people too distracted. I will say this.
Okay.
That whole discussion is a fairly involved one. And to do it justice, what I'd like to do is I'll do a presentation over at 107 Daily. I think that one's probably about 3 weeks out.
Okay.
I'm going to do the first of a number of presentations on Friday the 7th over at 107 Daily, and then I'll be doing a weekly presentation on various subjects that I want to cover. That's one of the critical ones, because if you don't understand that, you don't understand the nature of the fight we're in at a planetary level right now, in my opinion. And so I'll just tease and say that that all comes back to Antarctica, and we'll have that discussion. It's several weeks out. There's other more critical stuff. The thing that's the most critical right now, this second, is the discussion coming up to and immediately after January 6th, and this plot, if you will, to portray the 1 million plus people, probably closer to 2 million people, the largest demonstration in Washington, D.C. in American history, to portray them as people coming to Washington, D.C. to kill, loot, destroy, occupy inside the buildings and all that. This is the entire effort right now to change the historical record of what actually occurred there with the people that showed up on that date. So all of the media, all the press, all the AIs controlling conversations behind the scenes are aimed on that January 6th event, and Congress wanting to, portray it in a sinister, evil way. And by the way, when we go and look at the way that information is generated out through the internet, be it tweets, comments on videos just like this, the amount that are true, real people, versus the amount that are being generated by AIs and computers, the AIs have it in droves, and they mimic real accounts, real people pretty extensively. So for example, I just had a conversation, a technical conversation with people on an AI project that wanted my participation. And I had rejected it previously, but went ahead and listened anyway again in an updated version. The super short version of that conversation is, at current levels, with a relatively very modest budget and modest number of people involved, they're able to manipulate and mimic in ways that you cannot tell the difference as a normal person, mimic 1 million accounts. So, and then they have conversations between each other, and these are not low-level conversations. They are very complex. In going through and looking at conversations that were being done on a very specific subject that they'd been contracted to do by a company that you'd know the name of instantly. I looked at hundreds of comments, and I would say that it would be virtually impossible 99+% of the time to tell it wasn't a real person with a real account with a real history. And many of those accounts were 5 and 6 years old. They wanted to up their game from this million AI controlled accounts to 10 million. And they're just one player. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens across the world that are doing this. So when you think, and what they're doing is they're driving certain subject matter to the top of the search engine, certain subject matter to what you get to find or don't find. They're doing it for commercial purposes, but they also want to do it for political purposes. They want to do it to engineer how society looks at certain subject matter, certain information. So when you think that you're coming to your decision because other people are coming to the same decision, it's not as simple as that. Very targeted. In fact, they were able to target specific individuals, not just groups, in very precise ways, knowing where they intersect on the media that they access, to try and move group discussions and to bait out responses. And they were thrilled that they, on one particular thing, were reaching a 2% response rate. Most of the time it's down under 0.5% of real people responding to their concocted AI generated comments, input, or promoted ideas or videos. See, and so, for example, they had a particular video with a particular subject matter that they wanted to drive to the top of the search engines. So they took that particular video and drove it through different communities where it then got shared and repeated. And not one of the people that was sharing and repeating it was an actual human being. It was all done by computers. For a comparison, let me just say this. Most people have no knowledge of this. 70% of all the trades that occur in the New York Stock Exchange, 70% are never seen, touched, manipulated, considered, advised by a human being. 70% of these stock trades on the New York Stock Exchange are initiated, decided upon, done by computers. They do high frequency trading. They're in and out of stocks multiple times a day, sometimes multiple times an hour. And it's a computer's decision to go in. And you think, well, it's just because it's looking at other stocks. No, it isn't. It's seeing news feed from across the world and making decisions. It's seeing people coming up or going out of corporations and making decisions. It's comparative analysis from 10,000 data points that are weighted variously, and the computers, the AI, has learned how to make decisions based on experience, how the markets act or react to information. And then the primary computer programs that are the biggest dogs, there's smaller computer programs that are reacting simultaneously. They see certain triggers by the big computers and they follow along and initiate trades or anticipate a trade based on how the big computer programs are doing stuff. And they want to get there first, and they're live, they're smaller, they're able to anticipate and get there. So again, 70% of the transactions, no human is involved in the decision-making process to buy, trade, sell, point of entry, point of exit, timing, anything. In the same way, that same type of AI intelligence is manipulating the way we see and interact with the news. And there's active campaigns going on right now to affect how we view certain news stories. And the one that's getting the most attention right now, being actively pushed to drive the population to a certain predetermined conclusion narrative, all revolves around January 6th. That's the big one. And to portray this vast American population, 2 million people potentially showing up in Washington, D.C. on that date, certainly the largest ever in history, in the middle of the winter, not nice warm summer, middle of the winter. And that was a very churched crowd. And they weren't there to destroy or kill. They were there in prayer. They were there to be seen and heard. And by this government that runs the country, and their wishes to be heard. There's a problem, and they weren't fooled. This year, they won't go to Washington, D.C. That's a captured operation. But they will show up and do a felony stop from across the country and say, you know, this is a crime scene, and we're not going to let the country be run by people who want to change with a false narrative what actually happened, and pee in our leg and tell us it's raining. The American people know something's wrong with the way the vote was counted last year, and they certified the election before they verified the results. And there's more and more information every day. They can send out all the AIs they want to tell us that there's nothing wrong. They can send out all their people to back up the AIs that are part of this crime spree. But the reality is the facts are catching up with them. And as they do, as much as the AIs are driving the conversation and the narrative, physical people, real people showing up in a physical sense are going to recapture the authority away from the computers. We haven't quite lost it that far yet, but we're close. And what they want is to drive down the numbers of real people with their forced anything and shut us up. And if we can't be heard in our capital city, we'll be heard outside our capital city, but we will get control of this, God willing. That's where it's at.
Well, where do you see the next piece in the reversing of the election coming about? One, I mean, we were hoping it could have been, a number of months ago with Arizona, and it seems to have quietened a little, unless I've missed some key pieces over the last few days or weeks. But any idea on where we're going with that, when we might see a flip? Because we were talking about flips, a couple months ago, and there's a difference between a flip and being flipped. But in terms of the flip for the election, and President Trump said it this year that, we need to get that dealt with. We're very soon going to go into 2022. Any idea on when and where that might start to actually be permanently flipped in the favor of the true result?
Well, 4 of the states have already done election integrity public hearings that are ad hoc. In other words, while there are elected officials present, it's not one that's being run by a policing agency, the prosecutor, the legislature, etc. And they are taking testimony. After the first of the year, you're going to see a number more. Right now, I think there's 10 states that are on deck to do these ad hoc hearings. The first 4 states all want to do a second one. It was almost a practice. And the information that's coming out with actual testimony that's under oath, with affidavits, attested to under a penalty of perjury, of actual criminal activity, of things that were done in violation of election law, is gaining a lot of momentum. And so Where the choke point has been, you haven't been able to get to justice through the Justice Department. You haven't been able to get through the prosecutors because they decide, there's not a case here. It's not strong enough. It's this and that. That's getting an end run around it. And I believe that as more and more of the public shows up at these election integrity hearings and viewing them, because each of the states is slightly different. The issues that went on in Nevada or Colorado are similar, but they're uniquely different enough that you have to address them from within the state. And so across the country, we have multiple situations where there is more than irregularities. There's criminal activity that has to be addressed, hasn't been addressed, and that the push is for some type of legal response with results that have been denied thus far. I believe what you're going to find as you get further on here, based on my own experience on this stuff this far, there's certain information that I believe, as it becomes public, will be incontrovertible about the magnitude of what the theft was and who the players are involved. And when that happens, I think it changes the game again very seriously. Does it result in President Trump returning to office as president immediately? I don't believe so. As I've said, he is still a president. They never got him impeached. He's a president for life. As I said, by April of this year that we're in, anybody that voted for Biden would be the fool. And President Trump would still be president, a president, unimpeached and removed from office, removed from the title. While the House of Representatives voted for impeachment, the Senate never agreed to it. And so President Trump is still a president, unimpeached. The question is, does he actually regain power as the executive of the United States? There's a very precise technical term that you have to have in mind. Congress appoints or acknowledges the elected president of the United States via the Electoral College. Congress voted for Biden as president. They certified the results of the election that they failed to verify the data, where there was problems and abnormalities. But Congress did certify Joe Biden as president of the United States. Joe Biden is president of the United States. Unless he's impeached, he'll be a president for life also. With that in mind, if we get an honest election by the means that I believe are going to happen before the end of this 2022 season, where there is some type of extrajudicial from the administrative executive branch and exclusive to the military side of the U.S. government, two separate areas. If the military intervenes to get an honest, fair vote, the Congress that would be elected into office in 2022, that would take office in January 2023, can then go back and address the legal issues on the earlier vote, even going back to 2020, and can come to a different conclusion based on the new information and certify the correct winner of the election and place Trump in his proper office. Congress, between now and the completion of the 2022 election, has no motivation and no likelihood of coming to that conclusion, even if there was arrests or other things. That said, in a continuity in government situation where there's multiple ways that continuity in government can be maintained depending on who has the ball. So a lot of people are looking at devolution, which is one path. There are several. There's options. Which one is the power play and who has control of the helm in that power play? If you say that a enemy or enemies, internal or external, and they both require different responses, has captured the legitimate vote operation and twisted control over to a group that isn't the same as the American people had voted in mass, then there's different mechanisms to restore lawful authorities to positions of control in the governance of the country. The precise legal mechanisms to do that and the checkpoints to go through that process are contained in the Law of War Manual. That Law of War Manual, which you can go over to Flyover Conservatives, where I did a presentation on Thursday, and Flyover Conservatives has a link that you're welcome to link on your show also here for the manual, and you can download it. It's over 1,000 pages. And the Law of War Manual, and that's the Crossing the Delaware show that was done last Thursday. In the Law of War Manual, it precisely lists out the options based on certain criteria and what those legal options are for the persons trying to restore lawful governments in a country from a military and policing standpoint. And that manual was upgraded, modified based on long historical accepted procedures into a current manual during the first part of the Trump administration, before the first posts of that Letter 17 operation. Very precisely laid out, legal checkpoints, and it's event-driven, not date-driven. While there is overlap to dates, a lot of people have been looking at dates and missing, and I've been talking about this for 2.5 years, but it's now time to advance the conversation. Those events trigger certain legal options. 11.3 triggers 11.4, 11.4, again, foundation, 11 being the number of war. And so it's the foundations for this war that we're in. And those are events that are going to happen in the not too distant future that trigger a change in the way things are going here in the country. And in fact, I would contend, we talk about flip, just because the tide is turned doesn't mean that the tide has come full circle all the way to the other end. The tide has already turned. And now the process is well underway to a completion of a flip here in the country. And nothing is going to stop what's on its way right now. Nothing.
How many checkpoints of events in that manual, have we gone through already one, and how many more do you expect? Are we, 2/3 of the way through? Is it, or is
No,
it
we have
all
not
of them
had
have
the
to be
first event.
exhausted?
We've
not had the first event.
No, first event is 11/3 event.
And what would that be then? 11/3 event.
Enjoy the show.
Huh.
One,
So, and that's listed in that manual. So if we look at 11/3 in the manual, we'll get an idea of what you're proposing.
Sure.
Okay. So 11/3, when I first heard that, I was thinking, oh, that's 11/3 referring to the 2020 election, but 11/3 is something completely different, which will be
Not every number relies on a date. There's other things that go on, and that's the control criteria for how you do a lawfully waged war against an opponent who has captured the reins of control, but is an unlawful or belligerent government over the people.
Okay, so 11/3 is the first event. How many more in that sequence do we have to go through according to the manual?
Well, again, just because you have options doesn't mean every single one ends up being used. And
so it's not a linear set of options. It's okay. Yeah.
Right. Many of them overlap, and they don't have to be sequential. It's each thing, and in different areas, it's different responses required. Different persons doing different actions have created liability for themselves that's unique to them, but may not cover every single base in what's there. Others are going to be covered in every single one.
Talking of events, can I go back to kind of October, end of October, beginning of November, and I'll just code it this way. So we were talking about the possibility of HC, maybe seeing something in regards to that. Was there an event that took place that maybe wasn't as public as we first thought?
No, there's no secret rapture here. People are shit talking stuff that is not what's going on here. If it happens in secret, it doesn't have the curative impact to society that's needed or necessary. There's no secret rapture here. This is about the public seeing what's transpired in their name on multiple levels, and the consequences of that, both individual and collectively. And this is about a purging of that evil from our society, or our destruction. Either we address it or we're destroyed because of it.
So from what you're saying, that are we maybe seeing what we thought perhaps kind of the beginning of November-ish time? Maybe that is still the first event that we're still waiting for.
Yes.
Okay. And I agree about the public curative aspect, because that's what's required, because that is what will start to cure the people. Yeah. Sorry, Rach.
Yeah, there's no repentance unless the sin's revealed, and So anyway, go ahead. What was your other question?
Yeah.
I was curious, what percentage of people will not wake up, even when shown?
I hate to, I don't know that we know a specific number. God himself knows. In the most totally guessing form, it is something approaching 20%, probably.
Wow.
Huh.
And we know that because about half the people that get locked into a particular perspective will be pliable enough to adjust. So, for example, and I'll get a lot of heat, but I'll just say it. There was a AI operation that was done to map the alternative community using the flat Earth story. And it was looking for influencers, people that were malleable, suggestible, particular nodes where people were more interactive in justifying, explaining, etc. And so it was an AI aided operation, and DOD paid the money. I even know the guys that got the money. It was a DOD operation, a DARPA operation to track suggestibility in the alternative community, using flat earth as the conversation piece, and the information being tracked, which was unique, which allowed them to see the people using it, push certain things, push certain ideas, backed up with other data material, etc., to find the people that were suggestible who would then buy into and post out there and become tools in this AI dissemination operation. Within that community, just under half, even if you come in with anything in the world new, they will never, once they've bought in and become vested in that viewpoint, they can't let it go. In fact, it's like programming a person in MK Ultra. You can program them that an apple is actually a banana. And through various mechanisms, eventually they will just mindlessly refer to the apple as being a banana. And I'm just in a rudimentary sense. You can come back, provide any kind of information that you want to. They just cannot let go of that. They can't change their mind. They look at it, it's in the programming. They can even want to sort of rethink it, and they just can't. They can't break it. It's trauma-based programming, and so there's certain emotional traumas that lock things in. It's very hard to break. In this realm, the people taking the blue pill are so fixated and vested and even vexed by the way their life is set up around the blue pill. Everybody that's close to them is on the blue pill. To leave the blue pill leaves the security of the job, the people they interact with, the family, the relationships, that they won't sacrifice them because they need the comfort of them to continue. And to say that they would sacrifice that is to deny the rest of their life. They can't do it. They cannot make that leap. It's a bridge too far.
It sounds like the Yuri Bezmenov YouTube video talking about, destabilization, and then talking about how once people reach a certain point, there's no waking them up. Even if you show them, they still won't believe it.
Yep. No, that's true. That's exactly it. I mean, so how many people are going to wake up in the process of this? The traumas that are coming are a necessary component to getting as many people as possible to think critically, think again, and break the programming. This is societal programming out across the whole world, not just in some community or even a single country. The whole world is subject to this MK Ultra programming. And unfortunately, trauma, and I know there's a lot of people who have been through the MK Ultra programming and all that, various programs, and they get loved out of it and everything else. Even there, where they're growing out of it over time and somebody's worked with them and dealt with everything, unfortunately, they're still usually in a very traumatized state, and they haven't become powerful again, able to exercise themselves. The ones that have gone through some level of trauma are able to overcome the programming and become personally assertive again, and they lose some of their fear to do what has to be done. It's a conversation that's hard to have because most people it's too technical to, they want to argue this case or that case. There's always an exception to the rule, but in mass, and this is about the numbers. If you're going to take back the planet, the fastest, smoothest way is, the short, sharp whack, and to snap them out of the programming. And you get them close to the brink, which is what's happening right now. We're stretched tight as a drum, is a classic term. The rubber band is stretched all the way out there. It's right at the edge, the straw that breaks the camel's back. So societally, we've been moved by degrees to a level of stress and tension that's right at the edge of the breaking point. Now, at the right moment, you can do an event that takes it over relatively instantaneously. And especially if you're prepared for it, you can bring it back to resolution very quickly. If you don't have it pre-positioned, ready to snap, to break on command, then it's less predictable. So for example, with the earthquake generation technology, you go to an area where the plates are already pre-stressed. They're ready to have a quake. They're near the tipping point, and then you add in the extra energy, the energy waveform that takes it over the top and do a release relatively instantaneously. You didn't create all the stress for the entire magnitude of the quake that's released. You only targeted a place where the stress was near the breaking point, added that little extra, added the jiggling, if you will, that broke friction that tiny little bit and then took it the rest of the way. It's the same thing societally. And so what's about to happen, the stress, the strain, the near the breaking point, near-death experience that's going on in the country, that's this preconditioning so that when the event, the 11.3 event happens, it lays the groundwork instantaneously for the 11.4 reaction to begin then the reversal of fate, reversal of fortune, that is this Esther moment that we're about to enter.
Wow.
Wow. Well, bring it on. Bring it on.
Anyway, I do have, this is my only halfway free day that I have.
Yeah, we should let you go.
Yeah,
I came up
to the Midwest to do what I did here, and I'll be back down in the Southwest and the Southeast this week. I'll be on both coasts just in the next couple of days, and then other places around the country. So my travel's been, I think I was in 8 states in 10 days, some of them more than once. I actually changed coasts 4 times in the last 2 weeks.
So that's quite an easy load for you. From your usual load, then one. That's quite a kind of part-time thing for you. That then.
I've been wanting to go out and check fence lines for, 7-8 months and haven't had a day free to do it up until right now. So, that was my big day today. So fun to go out and do that. And,
well, thanks for sharing your time with us. Oh, before we let you go, Rachel reminded me of the question. Talking of another number, going back to you have to have just 2 pure descendants of Adam, but you said there's probably in reality a large proportion. Are we talking maybe 1 billion people in that category, 100 million,
No.
10 million,
No.
1,000? What are we looking at?
It's hard to say a precise number. It really is, but something under 1 million.
Okay.
But the problem is they're sifted out far and wide enough that you got to find that million. And remember, you can't allow one. through, or the whole game is not over. You could start over from a Luciferian standpoint. That's why they want wars and need wars to eliminate all humans, if you will. How did World War I start for America? It was the sinking of what ship?
Lusitania.
Lusitania. That's right. See, over and over again, it's the same crowd. They have to brand things with their names, their numbers, their symbology to get power from it. And they have to do it in plain sight. It's part of this karma thing. They have to tell you what they're doing. The devil has to kind of let you know what he's doing. God says all through scriptures, if you do this or this or this, then I do that and that and that. You do this good thing, I do this good thing, do this bad thing, I do this bad thing. God has to tell you what the consequences of your actions are and what he's going to do. The devil does also. And so they're in this competition, but they both have to let you know via their prophets. In the case of the devil himself, you could even make a good case that, its prophets are the Hollywood people, the magicians, the wizards putting their symbology in the movies. And then God has his prophets in the spiritual and even in the political, telling you if you do this or that, this is going to happen. And then it does. Wow, well, somebody told you. It wasn't done in the blind. People were predicting, for example, the collapse of the Social Security system for a very long time. You were told it was going to happen. And people blew it off. Who's the biggest target with this, thing that they're doing to everybody all over the world? It's older people. Why? Because if you can thin down the ranks of that group significantly enough, the Social Security imbalance goes away. You're being targeted. Don't kid yourself.
Yeah.
And that under 1 million group, would they have a common blood type that would connect them all?
No. There's a couple variations there that all still fit.
Okay. Can we say what those are?
I don't know that I'm the right guy to ask that question. If I did a little bit of back checking, I probably could answer it. But as I understand it, it's not quite as simple as what you're thinking. It's not just merely a blood type thing. There's other factors involved that you can have other blood types present. And an example of that would be the 12 tribes of Israel. Well, actually, there's several blood types. It's not one blood type for all 12 families, and yet they still are within those 12 families at their roots, direct descendants of Adam.
Okay.
So that starting group was not commingled in their blood types.
Now we have our research to do, Tom.
We can maybe pick that up a bit on another episode one. Yeah, that's interesting and quite illuminating, actually. Yeah. Yep. Well, thank you, buddy. As always, it's always a pleasure. It's always great to break bread with you and to go through all the number of things we go through. So it's a pleasure.
Well, and the one thing I would say to your listeners, listen, there's a lot of bends and twists in the roads, where we are, where we're going, what lies ahead. If you're looking to the creation, to even the numbers, the math, the alignments, certain trick words, or even individuals, gurus, I don't care who the person is that you think really has it down or is really smart or knows all this stuff. Ultimately, we answer to God himself for our actions, how we think, what we did. If you've got questions, go to the author of life, go to the author of the universe. If you pray a sincere prayer, our God, our Father in heaven, is more than willing to answer and able to answer a sincere prayer. God is as serious as you are about understanding your place in the world and the universe, and is more than glad to reveal himself to every single person individual. You don't need a intermediary to hear from God. You can be helped by intermediaries who can make things more understandable, can add some clarity, add some insight. I read stuff by people that are very, learned, have done incredible study in their work and everything else. And I get the benefit of understanding stuff that they give a lot of clarity to for me. But I do that with a sense of awe that God himself is the author of that information and helping me to find just exactly what he wants me to find, or to see in it or see through it to the real stuff, as opposed to lies, fallacies, etc. I believe that a sincere prayer from a sincere heart to a sincere Father in heaven will get a sincere response. And I would encourage everybody here to seek that. God is more than willing to get you to the right people, ideas, locations, groups to help you find him. And there's a divine directive here. We actually have the responsibility to find God, seek him out, and then understand the reason why there has to be a savior, why a blood sacrifice was involved. And by the way, if the blood was corrupted when Eve commingled her blood with the serpent, this humanoid, not human, this interloper, this intruder, it says in the New Testament, the blood of Christ is able to cleanse from all sin. While there has been corruption, there is this ability to have that cleansed, both in the physical realm and in the spiritual realm. And so that there may be commingling. A lot of these people would like you to believe that you can't be saved, or that there's no hope because of something you had no control over. That's not true. That which was introduced at the time of the first Adam can be cleansed and rooted out, and by some grace of God thing, and it goes back to the blood. So what's being tainted, what's being worked towards being tainted, and what's being cleansed, and even the healing. While a lot of people may be fooled, snookered into going along with this global madness that's there, the thing that followed the disciples of Christ was that there was signs and wonders and miracles that happened wherever they went. Christ did them, and he commanded that his disciples do them also, and to take authority over everything that creeps and crawls, just as was given to Adam. And so that authority exists even today. And I believe that part of the cure won't be from the normal medical side, but in fact will be signs and wonders. And when it happens, there's also lying signs and wonders. You got to decide you're praying to the God in heaven, qualify it. This is God, my Father in heaven, not the other God. You're looking for guidance. Our Father in heaven's more than glad to provide it. There you go, guys.
That's
that.
one of the. I think that's one of the best things you've ever said, Juan.
I agree. I love that. Thank you.
All right. There is hope. Keep the faith. Let's stay in touch. I love all of you. I appreciate you. You know, all of these people out in these audiences, you are in my prayers. And I do sweat bullets. I know that people are seeking stuff and they're hanging on by their fingernails. God himself knows that there are a whole world of true believers out there, and he is not going to let the devil and his minions win. Never going to happen. Let's be on the right side of history, be on the winning team, and enjoy the victories ahead. Even if the fight is hard, it's worth every second of it. Be counted on the winning team. I'll see you in the heavenly city when it's all done, but let's not leave 1 second sooner than when the job is done. I want to enjoy victory with all of you.
God bless you, brother. Love you. Thank you.
All right. Night, folks.
Thanks, man.